Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The day after the President's remarks to the University of Arizona, to the people of the nation with regard Gabriel Giffords, the massacre in Tucson on January 8th, the very good news is it is reported that Gabriel Giffords is continuing the recovery in a most miraculous fashion. The prayers work. Sitting up, feeling in the left and right arms, the left and right legs, opening her eyes, slowly being brought out of the anesthesia and other ways of dealing with a crisis, a trauma of this scale. I believe she's still on the breathing device, but I have no update. I didn't go to medical school. In any event, all good news. Malcolm Hoenlein of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations joins me tonight. Malcolm, very good news. Do you agree?
All good news.
All good news.
Everything.
Prayers work, Malcolm.
You couldn't pray for a better schedule for somebody who has to do a radio show than the events of this week.
Her eyes open for the president. Her eyes open for the president. She sits up. Now we go to the not so good news. We have report from Europe tonight over these last days that Lebanon, the people of Beirut and the people of Lebanon are in yet another crisis brought on by the so-called collapse of a government that was actually man-made. One man named Nasrallah, who remains underground in a television studio and has since 2006. In any event, Saad Hariri was with the President of the United States during this triggered event of the collapse of the government. Saad Hariri is the son of the man who was murdered in 2005. Saad Hariri is the prime minister, or was until the government fell, of Lebanon. This crisis right now, Malcolm, manufactured by Hezbollah, to what end?
Well, this is a very complex question. That was my reference about the events of the last 24 hours, in fact. Can keep talk shows going for months trying just to assess the different parts to this. So let's try to assess it. Number one player in this is not Nasrallah, but Iran. Khamenei, for the first time, made a comment. He never comments about internal decisions. He came out publicly and said that the investigation, the tribunal, is manipulated from foreign sources, came out against it. Hezbollah announced this on television while the President Hariri is, Prime Minister Hariri is sitting with the President. They come out on television. So it wasn't, it was well planned. It wasn't a sudden decision. They purposely wait for this minute. They say, we've told Hariri all the time, we want you to come out, say it's illegitimate, that you won't recognize it, you're not going to do anything. And he refused to say it, and in part because of pressure from the U.S., which has consistently supported the tribunal and wants him to uphold it. If you remember, he even went to Damascus and apologized to Assad and said, I know now it's not Syria, it wasn't you who did it, even though Syria probably played a continuing role in this. So I think first we look at Iran's role, which was to humiliate the United States and send a message to the U.S. that we're in control. And if you look at the play here, the weapons that have been increasingly being sent by Iran with Syria, right, the buildup over time, and today it is Iran that is calling the shots. The decisions are being made in Tehran, not in Beirut.
All right, let me review. The President is scheduled to sit with the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, the son of...
who came to see the King of Saudi Arabia here in New York.
In abeyance is the finding that the Prime Minister's father, Rafik Hariri, was murdered by a combination of Tehran, Damascus, and Hezbollah in Beirut 5 years ago. Tehran orders, after the Supreme Leader speaks, Tehran orders Hezbollah to take down the government because they were a dominant force in the government cabinet. In the meantime, this is meant to humiliate the United States, to repudiate the maneuvers made by Riyadh. That would be King Abdullah, who remains in New York under care in Manhattan. And at the same time to assert once again that Tehran runs Lebanon, runs Syria. Is that all correct?
All correct. It's meant to fundamentally divert attention from the SLT because the tribunal, because now the attention, of course, is going to be focused on a government. They have asked, the president of Lebanon has asked Hariri to remain as the interim prime minister and to oversee government, but the fact is that Hezbollah is consistently saying now, we will not accept Hariri continuing as the prime minister, which is setting up for a real deep division, perhaps civil war, not maybe expressed in the way, because today Hezbollah can control all of Lebanon and keep all the forces down, but remember that the why is the Hariri investigation so sensitive to Hezbollah is because even amongst its million followers, many in the Shiite community respected and liked Hariri, the old Hariri.
Who was close to the Saudi kingdom.
And close to the Saudi kingdom. The Christians, the Sunnis, the Druze also, of course, were his major supporters, and the feeling is that this could lead to these kind of disruptions. Feeling also being expressed by Lebanese, which some of whom I spoke to today, is the U.S. involvement has been episodic. They've been more involved in Yemen dealing with terrorism than in the situation in Lebanon. The king of Saudi Arabia pays a visit. They make deals with the Syrians, but the bottom line is that the feeling is that the U.S. Did not pose a threat to Hezbollah, did not fear any consequences from this move, and that to them, this is the more important. You know, there was even cell phone evidence that came out very recently that shows Hezbollah at the scene of the Hariri murder. So it's not a hypothetical. The only question is how much will the investigation actually show, and Hezbollah does not want to take the blame.
Let's look at the risk to Jerusalem. The Prime Minister going very far along with the machinations of the State Department and of others in the region, even to the point of an open gesture of possible conversation to Damascus. Does this all now come to an end? Has Damascus shown itself to be in a permanent alliance with the devils of Tehran?
It's a very good question. I think it's one that we will have to see how it plays out. I think Assad is going to play this very carefully. He's not going to be the one up. He's not going to be up front. He's not going to burn his bridges, because remember, he's also scared about has fears about Iran and about the other maneuvers. He is enthralled with Nasrallah, and everybody knows and will say this, that he has
Nasrallah is the General Secretary of Hezbollah in Beirut,
and you know, is supposedly charismatic to Assad. I don't think he is to many others, but so you have a very intricate relationship between this, and I think the Syrians are going to play this very carefully so as not to be seen but to be felt. And their power within Lebanon, linked with Iran, of course.
Back to Jerusalem. Is Jerusalem more at risk now with the government brittled in Beirut?
So there is a number of people who have assessed this, and what the general conclusion is that they're not going to do anything right now to heat up the border with Israel, because they're not going to want to take the risk of a war. If they feel that the price they're paying internally is becoming very great, then they might start doing some provocative actions along the border. Remember, they have 100 villages that act as military bases. They have huge infrastructure. They built tunnels.
Right.
They have so much there, including 50,000 missiles. And the amount of equipment is astonishing. Even the UN today acknowledges that there's no parallel to what the Hezbollah infrastructure is.
At the same time, we will have a conversation throughout the evening about this. Just in this moment, over these last weeks, you and I have very carefully watched the Palestinians and their sinister manipulation with regard the United Nations General Assembly. This decision to bring down the Beirut government and throw the north of the Middle East into turmoil, does that put a stop to the Palestinian machinations? Is that now a sidebar and will be ignored by the large players?
Well, I think it will make it more difficult for them and more complex, but I don't think that they will stop. They have made this their strategy, and despite the warnings from the United States, both of a veto and that this is counterproductive and violative of their past agreements, the fact is that I think that they are hell-bent on this. I do believe that there are fundamental premises, right, that everybody is going to be stepping back and focusing on Lebanon and will not want to take up, you know, this rogue PA resolution at this time.
Malcolm Hoenlein of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. In several days' time, on the January 24th, Monday, I will join Malcolm Hoenlein at the 92nd Street Y, correct, right. Malcolm?
Absolutely.
And Malcolm will be addressing the question of challenges and opportunities for American and world Jewry. That's a long-winded saying. We're going to do our program. We're going to do our program, Malcolm. That's what we're going to do. Now, it's at 8:15 p.m.
And John will be there.
At 92nd Street Y in New York City. It's 92y.org. If you're interested in how to obtain tickets, the number I will have for you later. But in any event, we'll be doing our show on stage live. Malcolm will address where we are in this present crisis in Beirut and with regard to the Palestinians. And then I get to ask Malcolm questions live, and he doesn't get a whole lot of preparation. Malcolm Hoenlein, I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.